What is up, Earthnoids and Spacenoids? I am just a simple new type, and in this episode, we're concluding Mobile Suit Gundam Advance of Zeta, Flag of Titans, Volume 1. Last time, Audrey took the stand. In the past, we saw the Dandelion in action. It was stripped of its armor to reveal the rosette underneath. This time, they will learn that one of the As-One members is dead. Or is he? Commander Bernardo takes the stand, and we see another Hazel custom loadout. So let's get into this. As the day is adjourned, Conrad tells Elliot, after being amazed at the sight of Audrey, that she too has been living a hard life on the moon. He mentions that for his second crime in Africa, they may need to call the air traffic controller for a witness. He realizes that he is referring to Roberto Bernardo. The only other person that would corroborate Bernardo being a dick that day would be Carl Matsubara. Conrad heads back to his place, where he is housing Audrey and Hendrik. The old man thinks that the outcome is already decided, but Conrad says not on his watch. As the three are talking, Joanna comes in and gives him a printout of an email from King George. He looks at the printout and passes it to Audrey. Carl is dead. He was working for the Colony Public Corporation when he had an accident a few days ago. King George is sending a Xeon messenger to Earth. Hendrik starts to play the blame game, but Audrey says their focus has to be on Elliot. They wonder what this messenger from Xeon is bringing. Conrad thinks that perhaps it is simply someone from Carl's estate, or perhaps they are bringing personal evidence that the Federation killed him and setting it up as an accident. Conrad wants to know everything about the mission in Africa. Audrey mentions that he was thrown in solitary confinement for 3 days due to egregious violations of flight regulations. Him being in solitary wasn't on record, and Elliot didn't mention anything about it. He wonders if this was covered up. They go over the details when the doorbell rings. Joanna has her gun ready in case anything goes down. He answers the door to see a young man hiding his face. He doesn't want to be seen by anyone. They let him in and wonder if they have news regarding Carl's death. He takes off his cap and Audrey lunges towards him. This causes Conrad to panic, but she is just hugging him. It happens to be Carl Matsubara. Commander Bernardo punches Elliot in the face before throwing him in solitary. He tells Elliot to reflect while in there, but all he thinks about was how the real last battle that the Federation fought was the Delaz conflict, and how Bascom, a Titan, carried the battle. He is released after 7 days, where he is met with Wes Murphy. He tells Bernardo not to interfere and to go through the proper channels if he wants to court-martial Elliot. He silences Bernardo, and the Titans ultimately will do what they need to test their mobile suits. Before Elliot could speak, Murphy gives him a good old bright slap. He tells him not to point his weapon at their own men. He says what he did is dishonorable. They don't have time to mess around. They have to do more tests on the Kihar. Most of the testing has already been done. The only thing to test is mid-air mobile armor to mobile suit transformation, and vice versa. Elliot is finally understanding the concept of lift after being on Earth for a little bit. They finish up their testing and head back to base, where Carl and Elliot goes to the bar. Carl asks him about solitary when Murphy comes in and gets a drink as well. He asks about Elliot using Amida Ray's test data. He mentions that most people learn from the past, but very few put it into practice like Elliot just did. All they have left to do is some testing on the Dandelion. They wonder if they will head back to Kompe Island, but it seems like the Titans are about to make moves. Murphy asks if they heard of Grips. It appears they have their own mobile suit testing going on there, separate from what the Titans test team is doing. The next day, they finally finish their testing. UC 0088. Conrad is stunned. Audrey and Hendrik is certain that this is Carl. Once he got word from King George, he didn't want to take any chances, so he faked his own death, and then came to find them. Conrad thinks that this is extreme, but it will allow the Federation to let their guard down. Carl says that this isn't just a trial. The Federation is dead set on killing ex-Titans members. Ever since the Pazoon incident, the Federation is tightening down in case of a Titans uprising. This, of course, is referring to Gundam Sentinel. And yes, I know I have to get back to covering it. Shut up. Like Elliot, Carl too thought of himself as the best of the best. Or as the writer puts it, the vanguard of the Federation. But it turns out that the Federation always despised them. Conrad is going to ensure that a fair trial takes place. He can see the fire in Carl's eyes. He has been struggling, or has some sort of internal conflict, since the end of the Grips conflict. They begin filling Carl in on everything. Since Elliot did point his weapon in Africa, there might not be anything that Carl could do about that particular charge. Elliot gets dragged out of his cell once again. He notices that Bernardo is going to be on the stand today. Gordon begins questioning the base commander, who recalls Elliot disobeying his orders. Everything that Bernardo was saying is true, but it is leaving out the fact that the commander left Elliot for dead and to fend off the Xeon remnants on his own. He ends his questioning and allows Conrad to begin his own. Conrad focuses on the lack of reinforcements that Bernardo didn't send out. He says that they didn't have any men to spare, but Conrad notes that they had 2 teams of GIMs deployed at Courtroom base. This causes Bernardo to stumble on his words. He asks if he disciplined Elliot at the base, and he says no. He has no further questions, and then calls to the stand Carl Matsubara. Like Audrey's appearance, the appearance of Carl riles up the courtroom. On the stand, he tells the court how they asked for reinforcements and they were denied. He then goes on about how they had to take down the remnants, pursuing them back to base. He talks about purging his armor. After fighting, they requested backup to help with armor recovery, but was denied once again. Carl explains that Elliot did point his rifle at the control room, but after 2 consecutive battles, he knew and Elliot knew that his rifle was completely depleted. He couldn't actually fire the rifle if he wanted to. He asks what happened next. He explains that Elliot was put into solitary confinement, which contradicts Bernardo's statement earlier. Conrad has no further questions. During his questioning, Gordon objected due to off-topic questioning, and the Commodore threatened to remove the defense. Conrad says to Elliot that he did this to send a message that they aren't backing down. Gordon begins questioning Carl and tries to get him to think that his perception is off. Conrad instantly objects. He says that there are no records to prove these statements that he is claiming. Carl makes a snarky comment back, saying then Bernardo's statements also can't be proven. The Commodore pounds his gavel and tells Carl not to make remarks, just answer the questions. Conrad notes that Gordon is just stalling. He has no further questions. The witnesses are dismissed, but the Commodore chastises Bernardo for perjuring himself. January, UC 0086. The team has returned to the Aswan. Once they returned to space, they had little downtime and became quite busy. The mechanics are adding more subarms to the Hazel custom. This will allow them to operate multiple beam rifles at the same time. Carl thinks it is impossible, but Pete the mechanic says that it is possible when there are more than 2 people in the unit. Carl is going out in the Hyzak and Elliot is running patrol in the Hazel 2, while the other 2 conduct tests. They head out and are happy to be free from gravity. Wes Murphy is piloting the new Hazel Custom subarm unit. The subarm unit contains multiple subarms that appears like the unit's skirt. This can be used to carry weapons like a beam saber or a beam rifle, but it is more effective at reloading energy packs, which allows the main arms to focus on the battle. This is barely used because it requires a skilled pilot to use. Murphy deploys an arm with it holding a beam rifle. He begins the test when mobile suits approach them. They are friendlies, Titans and Hyzaks. Murphy asks them to state their purpose, but gets no response. That is when the Aswan tells them to pursue and track the units. Murphy allows them to open fire around them, but not to hit them. Elliot has them in his sights, but they turn around and begin firing on him. Even with them firing, they have to capture them and can't risk hitting them. The 2 Hyzaks are able to make their escape. There has to be a ship tagging along with them close by, and wonder if they are in the nearby shoal zone. This all seems very fishy to Elliot. UC 0088. They head back to Conrad's place. They are starting to get the upper hand, but things are still grim. Getting the remaining charges dropped or going to rely on Hendrick's help. They decide to have dinner. Carl was one of the lowest ranks in the Colony Public Corporation. These people are the expendables who suffer from radiation poisoning and decompression sickness at the expense of maintaining the colonies. Audrey had a similar fate, scrounging for scraps in the lowest levels of the moon. They were suffering while the higher echelons of the Federation, the ones who should be taking responsibility for the actions of the Titans, live in luxury. This has always been the case with war, as people in power aren't the people on the ground. A tale as old as time. Joanna tells Conrad that the MPs reported that the people who broke into his house were thieves. Of course, it seems they are covering up for that as well. This is just another mistake that the Federation made, which they could use to their advantage. They need to prove that these were Federation soldiers and not thieves. Earlier, Joanna collected a list of journalists they could trust. They're going to leak the story of the attack. Conrad then shifts back to the AS-1 crew and says that he needs to know everything about the Phantom Gundam, UC-0086. After the testing of the subarm Hazel, the team enjoyed a relatively peaceful new year. However, after the Colony 30 incident, the AU got funding and amassed their own army. The Titans are now beginning operations to take down the AUG. Audrey has been hearing rumors on the internet that the Zombies are planning their revival of Zeon. Elliot has a feeling that these tiny skirmishes are about to become a war. And that will conclude Volume 1 of Mobile Suit Gundam Advance of Zeta, Flag of Titans. Conrad and the AS-1 team is fighting to save Elliot's life, but in reality they are fighting for those who were in the Titans but still trying to do the right thing. Unfortunately, the world will never see their hard efforts simply because they wore a Titan's uniform. A lot of what is happening in the novel is informed by what happened in Gundam Sentinel. The Federation is not going to allow another new Decides to happen. We are currently in July of UC-0088, and the new Decides were last seen in April of the same year, so this is still fresh in the minds of the Federation High Command. Next time in Volume 2, the Titans test team will have to capture the Garibaldi Beta. They will head to a satellite orbiting Earth to find the new TR-5 gap plant. And in the present, Conrad starts working with the press to get their story out there. But that will do it for now, new types. Remember, make sure there is no one out there that can corroborate your lies. Peace.